I just ask on the B&O matter? I know we're bouncing back and forth a little. On the B&O matter, did you look at processes and internal controls? So you've made an observation about one contract, but do you have any observation as to whether that was an anomaly, that it somehow slipped through an established process and system of internal controls that we have? Or are we missing process and control or controls or both around B&O tax tracking?
So this was specific to this vendor, and that was done to respond to the specific concerns that were brought forth. We have not expanded our review to look at the city's general process in ensuring B&O taxes are correctly paid or collected.
Right, and so, I don't know what the process is from here, but I would encourage the city to really, going back to this first item, I would encourage the city to object to management letter comments that are so-called best practice, unless this is something that we're held to or that through our own ordinance we've chosen to hold ourselves to. I think we're straying into a dangerous area. So this first item, I'd encourage you to think about whether you might want to object to it.
Okay.
All right.
So
That concludes the management letter then. So unless there's any other questions from the mayor of the council, we'll move on.
all right. So the next document included in your packet is the financial statement audit report. This report has already been published on our website, and that was so that the city could meet your bond deadline. So that what we've done is we've taken the published copy and we've condensed it for today's meeting. So if I can have everyone flip to page 4, that's where we'll begin.
Sorry, so we're not going over the remaining items on this document?
We talked about it in brief.
One page.
Oh,
Yep.
I was looking at the wrong page, that's this page.
Yep.
Wow. Got it, thank you.
Okay, so for the financial statement audit, we conduct our audit in accordance with governmental auditing standards. Those standards require that we gain an understanding of the city's internal controls or processes that you go through to prepare your annual financial report. We take a look at the city's processes, and you'll see in this report that there's 2 sections. One where we give a conclusion on the city's processes to prepare your annual financial report, and then the second where we issue our opinion. So beginning on page 4, this is our report on the internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance. For efficiency purposes, we've highlighted the key sentences for today's meeting. On page 5, you'll see the sentence, given these limitations, which means we don't look at every transaction during the course of the 16 operating period, but we do select transactions and look at the majority of the financial numbers, and we did not identify any deficiencies in the internal control. So that's a good, clean result there. That's what you want to obtain. And then auditing standards also require that we take a look at whether the city complied with all contracts, agreements, or anything else that could have a material impact on your financial statements if there was identified non-compliance. The highlighted sentence there again shows that the results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. The second report,
I assume that again is good?
Yep, that's very good. No non-compliance there. So on page 7, this is the second report where we issue our opinion on the financial statements presented by the city. It begins with management's responsibility is to prepare the financial statements. The auditor's responsibility is to express an opinion. And then turning to page 8, we've highlighted the key sentences. There are 2 opinions issued in this report. The city follows what's called the BARS manual, the Budgeting, Accounting, and Reporting Systems manual, which is authorized by the state of Washington. We have audited the statements in accordance with BARS manual, and you'll see that key sentence there. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. That's a good, clean audit opinion. That's what you want to receive. However, there are national standards issued by the AICPA, the Association of, the Certified Public Accountants, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, that require the auditor to note when a government does not report in full accrual GAAP. In the state of Washington, you have the choice. You can follow the BARS manual or you can follow full accrual GAAP. We make no recommendation on what basis the city follows, and we understand if you choose to follow full accrual GAAP, that's a tremendous investment of resources in order to be able to do that. But we are required to issue a secondary opinion when you follow the state allowed method of FAR's manual, and this is an adverse opinion issued on GAAP. This is not a negative opinion by any means. It's just a requirement that we note that the city has chosen to follow the state allowed method and not full accrual GAAP. So the second opinion is an adverse with GAAP, which means you basically have chosen not to follow GAAP, which is okay in the state of Washington. And this has no effect. Bond rating companies are well versed on this now.
Actually, our bond rating company says that this is an issue.
This is what you,
An issue.
And I
That
brought
they
it
would
up to
prefer
what
to
I
have
asked
GAAP
for.
statement.
Have you?
Yes, I
Oh,
have.
what's your bond rating company?
It's S&P.
S&P? Okay, that's the first I've heard of it. We've done outreach to all the three major bond rating companies, and they've assured us that this is no issue. And this
Yeah.
isn't a new requirement
So
either.
we just got questions again for it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been communicating because we're about to issue a bond.
Okay,
And the bond rating agency is absolutely communicating that that's a negative factor. I
A
can't,
negative
they're not
factor.
communicating that we therefore will, as a result of that one item, get a lower bond rating, but it is something that they're
Yeah.
clearly,
they want the full accrual.
well,
It's on-
the fact that we're not on GAAP basis
Yeah,
is a negative factor.
okay.
and they're by their criteria. I mean, it's nothing to do with state law, it's just what
Yeah,
they deem to be less risk. We have had conversations where I think a lot on our plate right now, but we're thinking within about a year or two, we're gonna seriously look at shifting to it. Part of our growing pains is, you know, we've been through some fast growth, and we're thinking we're probably quick, fast approaching a time that would be more effective for us to
Move
shift
to
to it.
GAAP.
But as you said, it's pretty intensive in terms of resources.
It is.
Yeah.
We typically see a transition in the city government from a cash basis to GAAP, typically between $20 and $30 million in annual revenues. So when you're in that range, that's typically where the choice is made.
So is that just
That-
all funds or?
I was gonna say
It's all
general
funds.
funds or
All
all
It's all
funds?
funds,
Okay.
So a
total.
city like us, where we're full service and we've got the enterprise funds and all, so we're, as you know, around 30 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're.
So we'd be around that, the top end of that range where cities start to look at this.
Yep, there's just, we always let you know that there's no requirement to do so. Full accrual GAAP does require so much more resources, and it does give you more comprehensive financial statements that show everything a little bit better, but there is some risk involved. The accounting standards that govern full accrual GAAP change often, and multiple new editions come out pretty much yearly. GASB gives about 4 to 8 new pronouncements every year. So,
Yeah, so there's a cost as you identified, but we don't know how much the value of the benefit is, but clearly there is some benefit, at least in the loan process.
Well, certainly a big cost in the transition, but Jim told me it wasn't so bad once it settled in into the new method.
Compared to the cost of implementing, that's a true statement.
Yeah.
There's a big
But Jerry said he
mountain
was
to go
fine, he
over.
could handle it.
Could you, again, you stated here, note one, I keep looking for note one again, but I just, you're referencing note one, where is that located?
So, in this report, the published version, the full statements of the city
All
are
right.
included.
Okay.
For today's meeting, we didn't include
Got
it
it.
to save some paper, but
Thanks for
you'll
reminding
have
me.
the financial statements in the notes.
And those are online already.
Good.
Yep, they're already online.
All right, let me double check, thank
Sure.
you.
Okay, the last section of the report, other matters, auditing standards require that whenever the city prepares supplemental schedules that support your basic financials, that we take a look at them and make sure that they're fairly stated. In this case, the city has presented what's called a schedule of liabilities, so that would be all your outstanding debt balances and compensated absences. We did take a look at the information presented on that schedule. It's fairly stated, and so we are able to issue that highlighted sentence. In our opinion, the information is fairly stated in all material respects, so that schedule is stated fairly well. And then with that, page 10 will list the statements that were audited for the period, and then again on page 40, because the statements are issued in between, that's the information about our office. Is there any questions on the financial statement audit report?
A few. So, the financial statements that you're reporting on for the period ending December 31st, 2016. Today's date, as you know, is July 3rd, 2018. So, as a city council member who has some responsibility for oversight in financial areas, and who sits on the finance committee as our council. The timeliness of your audit is one of the factors that we look to in discharging our duties for financial oversight. So I just wonder if you could comment on why now I noticed that, and I'm aware that your report on the financial statements was issued in March 22nd of 2018, but that still is much later. That's much later than we normally in the past have received that report, and it's still a long time after the end of 2016. So I wonder if you could kind of comment on two things. One is, why did it take so long this year? And what can we expect in the future?
Good questions. To answer the first question, why did it take so long? Our typical practice is to complete an audit within 1 year after your fiscal year end, so by the end of 2017. We did begin the city's audit in November, I believe, of 2017, but during the course of our field work, we received multiple citizen hotline concerns. In total, we had 6 citizen hotline concerns that were very detailed concerns that took additional time and resources to work with the city to get all of the answers to those. We typically try to hold both audits open so that we can have one complete exit conference, which did delay the financial report. However, we were able to release that to meet the bond needs. But in order to properly get through all of the concerns that came through and understand, I mean, we are still, to this day, still getting questions and getting information. So I think we finally have everything settled. But they were very involved concerns. It's not often that we have citizen hotline concerns. In this case, we had 6. And so we did need to take the additional time to properly get through those. And we do have additional concerns that will be tabled for the next audit. Going forward, what should you expect? One of the items that we are going to be talking about in our documents today is that we are going to be coming back out this year to do a financial audit for 17 before the end of the year. So that will get the financial statement schedule back on track. But given the time that we are talking about the accountability audit, we have worked with city management to discuss a one-time 2-year accountability audit, which will include a 2017 and 2018 and be done next year in 2019. So that you have time to consider the results that we're sharing with you today before the next audit occurs.
So then, am I understanding correctly that this upcoming audit for the fiscal year 2017, that you would not include an accountability audit
That's
in
correct.
that audit?
It would just be financial.
I'm still trying to understand your timing. The previous year, the 2015 year, wasn't our audit report dated? In other words, your audit was issued in November?
So that audit had a single audit deadline, federal deadline, so that whole audit has to be done, the financial statements and the federal work has to be done before September. So that's why we'd have to come in earlier than to meet that deadline. So that's why that particular year, it was done before September because of the federal deadline that was required for a single audit.
All right, and you've already been able to make an assessment that for this year, it doesn't appear that we would be subject to that audit.
Correct.
Can I, sorry, can I ask, another question. Were there, you commented on whether there were uncorrected misstatements and whether there were material misstatements that were corrected by management during the audit. You said there were none of either of those. I want to ask, were there, I have 2 questions. Were there any less than material misstatements identified in your audit that were corrected prior to the issuance of your report? And then also, did management report any to you prior to or during your audit that management made subsequent to filing their May financial statement filing? I want to get a sense, as you can see from the 2 questions, of what level of adjustments. I see there was no material, but what level of adjustments were there? Sort of number, dollar amount? That's my
Right,
question.
so we did have 2 items that had to be added onto the schedule of liabilities, some debt, and then we did have a note disclosure that needed to be added. That was subsequent to our audit, or our audit found that needed to be added, but there was nothing that management had found when we had gotten it. So,
Or that you found?
or that, those were the only 2 items that we had found.
Got it.
Yep,
Okay,
that
and
we had
then there
found.
was nothing.
Correct.
And so would it be reasonable for us to think of those 3 items that you mentioned as disclosure items? Or
It's
as opposed
presentation,
to?
more presentation items, right? So
Presentation
presentation
items.
items, small insignificant items that we noted.
So the city was aware, in the books and records, they were aware of these matters, they just had not properly presented them into the financial statements?
Correct.
Thank you. I have more questions. All right. I just want to focus, maybe you've just answered it for me, I want to focus on the audit cost.
Sure, and we are gonna go through that document again. Would it help to kind of work through and go back to that document and we might answer some
Oh,
of your questions?
you have yet to present on that
Yep.
document, that's fine, I'll hold those. Let me just see if I had any other question on this document. I didn't, thank you.
Okay, great. So, after the financial report, there were three additional documents that we wanted to share with you today. Our office, as we've discussed, does operate a citizen hotline referral program. So anytime a citizen hotline is received and is considered during the audit, we do, after we publish our reports, we do respond to the citizen with the results of any work that was performed to address their concerns. In this case, with the 6 citizen hotlines, we also share those conclusions to the city as well. So you'll see in your packet a copy of the letter to the city summarizing the results of our work on the hotline concerns that were evaluated during our audit, and that is there for your reference as well. And following the report publishing, we will also respond directly to the citizen with the same conclusions. Also in your packet, we do have a copy of the management representation letter request. This is a standard audit letter that we request in order to get the city's assurance that the representations made during the course of the audit are correct. It's a form letter, so we have provided in your packet the template that was prepared for management, and we understand that management is currently working on signing that for us, which is the last document that we needed in order to release the reports. If there's no other questions on those, we'll return back to the exit conference agenda, which is that first document that we had on the left-hand page. So starting under the section,
You were just going through the citizens' concerns.
we just provided that. If you'd like, we can walk through it.
So it was 6 different citizens with a sum total of about 17 or 18 complaints. Is that some were kind of difficult. Okay, and all were addressed. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to skim through these quickly, but it's the first time I've seen this. But I didn't catch that any of them found any kind of red flags or concerns.
So the only recommendations resulting
for the
from these
contract.
were in the management letter,
Right.
and then we had a few minor items and exit items, but the remainder, we found no non-compliant.
Right. In the contract, we had already brought to the attention of the auditor and addressed. Okay.
Is this published?
This is a public record, but it's not published on our website, no.
Okay.
Only our audit reports get published on the website.
Sorry, can I just follow up question on that? So are we looking at the document that's dated July 3rd, addressed to Mayor Larson and city council members, various citizens contacted our office, et cetera?
Yes.
Yeah.
So did I just hear that there were 17 concerns raised?
There were 6 individual citizen hotline concerns. Many of them had multiple concerns, and many of them were duplicative. So we have summarized all of the different concerns in this letter to you.
And is the number of unique concerns 17 or something else?
It's about 15. This is the sum total of all the.
Yes, this is the sum total of all of
concerns.
them. So it's
All right, so somewhere around 15. And out of 15 or so complaints by 6 different people,
I'm counting 15.
15 concerns raised by 6 different people, you found nothing.
Well, we did find the items that were presented in the management letter.
So
and
best
then
practices, recommendations.
And then we found a few minor housekeeping items.
Okay, we'll talk about cost in a minute. Are the concerns that are raised to you and the individuals raising them, are those names public?
During the course of the audit work, they are not made public. After our reports are published, they are available for the city to request. If they get, there were some anonymous hotlines as well, so we don't have any information on those ones. Okay. If there's no other questions.
Sorry, just a misunderstanding of my implication. My implication is that there we have some citizens who are concerned. It might be nice for the city to reach out to those people.
Sure.
It just occurred to me that that might be seen, that's the implication of my question, not anything else.
Sure. Okay, if there's no other questions on the letter, back on the exit conference agenda, under the heading recommendations not included in our report, we have discussed the one management letter that our audit has, and in addition, we discussed that there were a few minor exit items that were shared with management.
I'm sorry, you're back on which one now?
The first document, the exit conference agenda,
Left side
which is
there.
on
On the left side, okay,
website.
gotcha.
And then, council has already talked about the communications required by audit standards. We did address that there were no material misstatements corrected during the course of the financial audit, and that there were no remaining uncorrected misstatements. Turning to the second page, under the heading finalizing your audit, we do expect to issue the city's accountability report in approximately the next 2 weeks, once we have obtained that last document that we need. You may sign up if you'd like to obtain automatic notifications when the reports of your city or other cities become public, and there's a link to that on that website. The management representation letter, we have discussed the request for that letter and understand that the city is working on getting that ready for us. In terms of audit costs, we did provide an estimate of the cost of the audit at the beginning of our audit. That was prior to the citizen hotline concerns coming in during the course of our field work. We did have one minor one at that time, but the other 5 came in after we began our audit. We worked with the city to discuss the need to increase the audit costs to fully vet the concerns that came through. And we discussed that cost with them, and then the actual cost is there for your reference. Is there any questions?
So if I'm doing the math right, the hotline complaints resulted in an additional $5,000 of cost on the original $26,000.
Came up to 6,400.
64?
Which one of us is right?
So the estimate for the audit without the citizen hotlines was $24,600. There was one increase performed during the course of the audit work to
Oh,
26.
I was including the travel cost.
Oh, travel is
included,
26,100, sorry.
So it'd be 26,100.
I was including the travel cost in the original estimate.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get. So
I
our
was
total
doing
cost
the
of-
delta between 26,100 and 31,000.
Yeah, so the 31,000, does that include travel costs?
Yes.
That includes-
Okay, so 31 is equivalent to, as the mayor pointed out, the 24, 25, 26,100, is that? So
there's
26,100 went to 31,000.
So there's additional travel costs embedded in that $5,000 delta, correct? The delta
Yeah.
between 26,100 and 31,000.
No, so there was no additional travel for that, so it was just.
Or I'm saying if there was any, it would be embedded in that difference, or embedded in the total.
If there was,
If
yeah,
there was,
the
yeah.
full total is the 31.
Yeah, okay. So it's a delta of about just shy of 4,900.
Got it.
Okay. We've also discussed the next scheduled audit for the city will be a financial statement audit, which will be conducted later this year in the fall. And then in an effort to allow the city to implement or assess current audit recommendations, we have discussed that we will do a one-time 2-year accountability audit for 17 and 18, which would be us coming back just next year to get that back on track. And then we've also provided an estimate for the cost of your next audit, which would be just the financial. If there are any other items that the city would like to discuss regarding that estimate, please let us know. We'd be happy to discuss those. Or if there's any concerns with the proposed plan.
Can I just ask some questions about it?
Sure.
So, from these numbers, it looks like the significant majority of costs of an audit is the performance audit, not the financial statement audit. So it looks like the financial statement is 10,000.
The accountability audit. Yes,
What did
under
I say?
performance, but
Performance.
Thank
similar.
you, I apologize, thank
Yes.
you.
Yes,
The accountability audit is the majority of the audit. costs.
Correct.
yeah. The financial audit under the cash basis method is pretty streamlined, so it doesn't take a significant amount of time.
Well, right, and what I'm, so my next question is, it's just such a long time after the year ends. Is it possible in years, is it possible for this coming year to have this audit moved up so it's more timely?
So we always take requests. It depends on our current audit schedule. We do have to prioritize those those governments that have hard deadlines, whether they're going for a CAFR award that's at the end of June or a federal audit deadline that's due by the end of September. But if there's capacity, we're more than happy to move an audit period up. Of course, the city would have to make sure the financials are ready, so.
And the support and et cetera and stuff.
I have a follow-up question.
Mr. Hamud? I just want to make sure you heard the question and the answer there. I was
Yes.
asking about what, I mean, obviously that's
Because
for
we
you.
discussed, we were trying to verify, I was asking Jerry, because we actually discussed this
Yeah.
during.
Yeah,
our-
I'm just pointing, it's not for me to set the audit schedule, that's for you.
We asked them what their.
But it sounds like there's some room for discussion there. I would just say purely from the council member's perspective, the sooner the audit report is out, the more useful it is to us.
I wanted to ask about the fact that this audit didn't get completed until literally today. Did that have any bearing on the next schedule for the 2017 audit as far as availability of staff capacity to get it done? And then subject of some internal discussions concerned that, given the lateness of this one.
Well, the lateness of this one was only attributed to the citizen hotline work and what was needed to correctly get through all of the concerns that came through. Staffing wise, we have the staff, we can conduct the audit when the city is ready, assuming that the North King County team has the capacity to do it earlier.
I was part of the discussions back in December on the hotline issues, and we responded in January. There were a few follow-ups, but I guess I'm questioning or asking about the number of months it took to get through those, because you had all the information you needed from us. I don't recall answering any more additional questions after that, but it seems like, 5, 6 months have rolled along, and now we're looking at finding the outcome of those. Just curious as to how that happened, what was the delay, I guess, or anything else.
Sure, there was a significant amount of review that went into these hotlines due to the amount of detail that was in them. So, and that takes part of the time.
I appreciate your thoroughness with those issues to dispel any concerns that there's, improprieties going on in the city. As much as the delays were frustrating, if that's what it took to get us to an answer, I appreciate. I don't want to make it sound like we're totally criticizing, so I appreciate it. Was important.
No,
I just needed an answer because
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
answer the staff who was asking me the questions, so.
Oh.
Yeah, it's understandable. When information comes in, we do our best to prioritize it. We do have current audits underway, but we also want to make sure that we give it the attention it needs and that we fully vet it before issuing a conclusion.
Frankly, there was some speculation that the auditor didn't have enough staff to do all these things.
Fully staffed.
So,
Just a quick question, when you were talking about cash basis financial statements being, that part of the audit being relatively streamlined, so if we switch to the gap method, then accrual method, what might we expect that to do to the cost of the annual audit
Well,
and the timing?
Yeah, so there's lots of implications that the city will have to assess, starting with the preparation of the financial statements from the city's own staff.
Right,
That's
no,
gonna
I was
take
thinking
what-
on the
audit
auditor
side.
side.
It's
yeah.
more time intensive for you guys, too.
Yeah, it's on average depending on how many major funds you have, it can be about 3 times the cost. It's significant because the cash basis financial audit is so streamlined, it's not even comparable to what it would take. We have to audit individual balances.
Right, and the time, how much does that add to the time on SAO
I mean,
side?
it's about the cost, we
That's based
bill
on
based on
time.
an hour, so it's about 3
Same
times the
thing,
amount of
okay.
work, so.
Okay, thank you.
Are you aware of any, maybe a dumb question, but are you aware of any state grants that assists, cities doing that transition, that is with the cost of the transition or anything along those lines?
Not state grants, no. We do have a lot of services our office offers through our performance center that are free to the city. They may have some services that could potentially assist with that. It's worth checking into.
Those resources.
just as a follow-up, would you agree with the statement that, so there's a whole thing called a balance sheet they have to audit, so there's a whole bunch of additional audit procedures, but a big chunk of, and that's a big chunk of the hours they spend, but a not insignificant chunk of time is spent on the reporting. A comprehensive annual financial report, or CAFR, is a pretty substantial document, far more substantial than the document that we issue now under the cash basis under the VAR's reporting guidelines. So there's a lot of time, the auditor has to spend with with that report, let alone just the underlying numbers.
Right.
There's a whole, yeah, so that's, you're thinking to yourself, geez, how could it be so much? A lot is actually because of the much more extensive reporting, yes.
Yep, and the auditing standards for a GAAP audit have increased quite a bit, so they require a lot more assurance and testing. Sample sizes are larger of transactions, so.
I'm just curious, what's the largest city that you can think of that you've audited personally that's still on cash basis in Washington?
On a cash basis, that's a good question.
A lot of gap ones.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
full
and-
service too, though.
Yeah,
It's different.
So I primarily cover our Snohomish County region. The largest cities in Snohomish County that are still on cash would be Arlington, Snohomish, Lake Stevens, Monroe. Most everyone else has switched over to GAAP.
Which, most of those communities are kind of our size, are they not?
They're larger,
Yeah.
So there's cities near us, for example, Covington has gaps,
They're all
smaller
small.
side, yeah, so, so there's, around this area, there's some that are smaller than us, but then there's some that are, there are definitely some that are bigger than us that also do cash, so it's kind of a mixed bag.
And I would also say your first audit under a GAAP could be more than the typical average cost because of the first year procedures on the balance sheet.
Well, you guys are really warming me up, trying to sell me the corners.
You're
Just
sold
giving
on
you a
there.
clear picture.
We're not talking about the benefits, we're talking about the cost.
Yeah, 4 times the cost on your.
There's a whole benefits conversation that you have to have with that.
Yeah.
But there is, it's not an insignificant cost, which is why there isn't any,
But there's a huge upside, right, Jim?
there's a lot of upside.
Yeah.
Things like trying to understand the impact of capital spending.
Yeah, your full capital depreciation.
Right, so our financial statements are very prone to the layman misunderstanding operational expenditures and capital expenditures. It all kind of looks the same in our reporting, and capital expenditures can be, as you know, from our capital budget, massively
Yeah.
multiple times.
So you
the
can't
amount of operating.
see a
don't
more
that.
active trend.
It's very difficult to see that, certainly for laborers. So there's all kinds of benefits that kind of, you have to sort of think it through. It's not an easy decision, but it's a sort of, but that's why you're hearing sort of noise about directionally, but not someone sort of standing, jumping up and down and saying, now. It's more of a, we should be thinking about it.
When it keeps the inventory of all your capital, it's in front
Absolutely.
and center too, correct?
Reports on it, it's part of, that balance sheet has all your assets, all your liabilities. It's a lot more information that's useful. As you get larger, it becomes indispensable to have that.
Yep, I will say that the majority of our audit findings are issued on GAAP financial statements, and that's the risk with the changing audit standards, so.
What do you think, Wayne, cash or accrual?
Can I ask, I just want to double back to this cost. So we had